All right, what is going on, everyone? Welcome to episode 3 of the Cooperative Cast. Today's guest is Mr. Erik Hogan. And Erik's been coaching out of the state of Maine in the United States. He's been in the game of powerlifting coaching for a while now, and I think he currently maintains a roster of about 50 athletes, and he's my own personal coach as well. So thank you for joining me on the show, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, I think you did your research. That was pretty accurate right there.
Thank you. Yeah, like, especially for the people in my country, if you want, can you give us like a little introduction about yourself in addition to what I just said?
Yeah, so been coaching since 2018, been slowly kind of building up my roster over the span of those years. Most of my athletes are in the US and primarily compete through USA Powerlifting. I coach our wonderful guest right here, Mr. Jonas here. And we've been working together for, a decent amount of time now. It seems like it's been longer than what it is, but
Sure.
yeah, I'm an active competitor. I've also been competing since 2018. I just recently came off of my most recent meet a few days ago, my 16th meet. I'm a referee and meet director. We've ran about 12. I believe we're going to be on meet number 12 in the state of Maine. And yeah, I went to school for exercise science, graduated in 2020, was kind of working, jobs in the PT field as well as the education field until I had enough wherewithal to kind of make the move to kind of take my business full time. And I've been full time as a powerlifting coach since 2023. And then recently expanded to having, I believe, 6 coaches underneath me who are Team Hogan official coaches, and things have kind of taken off in that direction. So I think that's probably the easiest way to describe everything.
Yeah, thank you, man. So I wanted to bring you on specifically for this episode because I think where you stand out as a coach, especially, is the way you manage communication and like soft skills in your coaching. And I didn't want to make this episode specifically about like hard skills like programming, technique coaching, and so on, because I think, to be honest, like most coaches' skill set is pretty comparable when it comes to that, their knowledge. And I think the real separator is more like the human part. How do you communicate? How do you deal with different personality types? And I think both of us share like a similar philosophy here. So first one I wanted to get into, like it's not really talked much about, interestingly, even though it's in my opinion, like it's very important. And that's just like, how do you make sure as a coach that your athletes, they feel heard, they feel safe, they feel respected? What's your philosophy like in terms of adapting to an athlete's personality, factoring in their needs and their ideas, even using stuff like appropriate wording and so on? Like how do you approach that?
Yeah, and I think the first piece to highlight is what you just kind of ended with is appropriate wording. I think that you can say the same thing to 5 different athletes in terms of intent, and if you say that the same way, it's going to be interpreted differently with all 5 of those athletes. Now, if you say it differently for all 5 of those athletes, it can have the same kind of effect for them and stuff of the like. And I think what it just comes down to is you have to pay attention, right? And I think if you get your feedback in and you're just glancing through it, right, and you don't understand, the trends that you see, if you work with someone for long enough, even say 6 months, you can understand what their personality is. Are they a free-flowing person and, are very what's the word I'm looking for? Like maybe unserious, and then all of a sudden their feedback starts to be more serious and more like, maybe not necessarily direct, because we always want direct feedback, but like there's a distinct personality change. You know what I mean? Having the wherewithal to just kind of pay attention to that and have the patience to look into stuff like that is the first part, right? So yeah, when it comes to just like verbiage and stuff of the like, I'm very careful because I've had situations that, and I'm sure maybe you have as well, and I'm sure other coaches listening to this, can kind of, relate to this. You can have every intent to be, very constructive, very, what's the word I'm looking for here? Uh, I guess direct is the only word that comes to mind with your feedback. And that could be sometimes interpreted by an athlete as maybe a shot to their character, maybe
Mm.
something that is, you laid it on too harsh, stuff of the like, or it could be the opposite, where it's like, can you stop beating around the bush and just tell me like what the actual issue is? Realistically speaking, you just have to vet people out, right? And hopefully, when you do your intakes, when you take a client on, and I know for me, I didn't do an awesome job of this early on, so like first 2 years of my coaching. Nowadays, especially when I'm taking people on doing my intake, I really try to vet out their personality because I think above anything else with coaching, you have to be somewhat compatible in terms of personalities, right?
Yes.
If you're like a stoic robot and you're working with someone who's not that type of a person, you can do everything that you want. You're probably never going to meet them where they're at. You know what I mean? So you have to be what I like to call a chameleon when it comes to people's personalities.
Yeah, yeah. I think I agree here because kind of what you mentioned now about being able to like adapt your personality, but not shifting too much. Like you're not gonna like bend over backwards in terms of changing up the way you are just to like fit the athlete's personality. As a coach, you should be able to like at the same time like fuel the fire of an athlete who's like extremely locked in with their training, like taking care of all the variables. But you gotta still be like remain understanding of an athlete for whom like powerlifting is maybe not their number one priority. Like if you want to be able to work with both of them, you gotta be able to adapt to both of their personalities, and that I think requires like just communicating differently, and maybe that's even just like using different wording, like and adapting to what their actual goals are, like or even with like I just mentioned with language. I'm probably not gonna talk the same way to my, I don't know, 17-year-old young athlete as to the veteran who's been competing for 6 years or something, and who's like 40 years old or something. It doesn't mean like I'm gonna like go full on slang mode and talk like a 70-year-old with my 17-year-old athlete,
Yeah.
but it's probably gonna be a bit different, like, and I think that's a good thing too, like you
I think so.
probably shouldn't like be extremely rigid in the way you communicate and do it exactly the same. I don't think that actually even like feels right to do so, like. And another thing I was thinking about is just even based on experience level too, like if you got an athlete who's been, maybe they've been powerlifting for 3 months now and they've been coach for 3 months maybe, you're probably not gonna talk the same way about programming, technique, whatever, as with someone who's been competing for 10 years, because maybe they just don't know what that term actually means. They don't know what a primary day is, what a secondary day is, whatever,
Yeah.
And for someone who's been doing this for a long time, you probably don't need to explain everything as in as much detail as with someone who's been doing this for a much longer time,
Right. That's a very good way to put it. And I think something came to mind too. Like I I end up having the conversation with athletes too, where it's like I just want explicitly what their goals are, right? And when I get an explicit answer as to what their goals are, and I'm like, okay, so based upon X, Y, and Z, you told me this is what your ultimate goal is. I need you to understand that this is what the accountability looks like on my end to get you there, right? It's maybe not always going to be the most comfortable in terms of, hey, you told me you want to go to, let's take, I'm in the States, USAPL is still probably the bigger federation. You want to go to USAPL Nationals and you want a medal. And currently, like from the outside looking in, you're probably like, I don't know, 17th if you show up to Nationals. You're playing from behind. You got to do extra, right? You can't just keep training and then you're going to be a medalist at nationals. Maybe if you give it enough time, sure. But if you want to do it within the timeline that most people want to do it, which is like in the next couple of years, you're going to have to do extra. And I'm going to have to be
Yep.
on you to do extra. And if you're not doing extra, I can give leeway if you don't have those goals. Because again, like you just said, if that's powerlifting's not your life and it's not something that's like a major priority, bro, lifting weights is not that serious. You know what I mean? Like if you have to miss a session, you got to move it to the next day. Realistically speaking, the world is going to keep spinning. We're going to be fine. You want a medal at nationals and you're from the outside looking in, that's not the things that people do. You need to justify reasons to get your training in, not justify reasons to move it to a next day. You know what I mean? So it's like just different accountability systems, and what you just kind of said, having your system and then kind of standing on your system, and then just being flexible. You want to have your core pillars, but be flexible from them, not just have your core pillars and then never deviate from them. We hear it all the time, right? Just coaching personalities clash with athletes, and it's just like, yeah, I understood what I was getting into, but maybe it just wasn't necessarily a good fit interpersonally, and that's completely
Mhm.
fine. You know what I mean? It's kind of like any interpersonal relationship at that point.
Yeah, and I think these conversations they can be hard sometimes, especially when it comes to like a person, like their goals are not matching up to what they're actually putting in, and sometimes you gotta have to talk, and it's never really a comfortable thing to do, I think, because it's just weird, but I think oftentimes like these conversations like you come out of them with a, like when you finally talk about something like this, usually it turns out pretty well, and you can like get behind like what is actually going on. Like do you like, how bad do you want it really, and
Hmm.
obviously, like, bottom line, it's perfectly fine if it's not your number one priority in life. Perfectly fine,
Right.
but if you want to get that medal, if you want to qualify, if you want to do that and that, there's no other way around than putting in the work. And obviously we want to remain understanding of everything else, and that's also our job, like to make that happen as well. But yeah, it's just, I think it's important to sometimes like have these conversations when it just doesn't match up, like these two different, like the goal and then what you're actually putting in.
And as coaches, we don't love having those conversations, like you said. You know what I mean? It's like I mean, maybe some people out there are just searching for confrontation and stuff of the like, and maybe you probably shouldn't be coaching. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you're looking for issues and stuff of the like. But we don't like seek out trying to call people out. We have to sometimes, though. You know what I mean? And that's not something that a situation that we want to be in. We try to do our best to make sure that things don't actually get to that point. But like you said, sometimes when you finally talk about stuff like that, sometimes everything that happens thereafter is kind of like it was kind of almost like a turning point, if you will, right? Like
Yeah.
a you know you're over the hill, I guess, in terms of all of the
Yep.
things that like, oh, okay, you just put it into perspective that you're right. I vocalized this was my goal, but my actions are not exactly. Because again, everyone can say that. I mean, I could say to him blue in the face, I want to go to IPF Worlds and I want to be world champion or whatever. Is I don't know about in terms of like myself, but like a theoretical person, am I willing to do all of the things necessary to make that happen? Can I even make that happen? Right? Is that in my
Yeah.
genetic code to actually be realistic? And then sometimes just like I would almost always rather have someone who has like all of these grand goals and then reel them in, than someone who just doesn't even like want to try to begin with. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Of course.
Um, because I think that's just a mark of nature. Most people get into the sport guns blazing, and then they kind of settle into the fact that like, okay, not everyone can be IPF world champion. What's like an actual realistic goal for me? Um, and then just kind of like being free flowing with that. So
Yeah. Yep. Before we get into the next one, I wanted to touch upon this little part a bit, because I think it's I don't know if I will call it like a controversial thing, but I think we all know athletes who've had bad experiences with previous coaches, no matter what
yeah.
exactly happened. But like, how in that vein, when someone comes to you like, and stuff happened, whatever it was, like, how do you approach the making them actually feel like, let's say, respected and safe when it comes to maybe something bad happened? Like, how do you approach those situations? How would you do that?
Yeah, so I guess just for clarification purposes, are we asking about um, an athlete coming from a former coach that maybe had a situation where they don't feel unsafe and then allowing them to feel safe under your service?
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think again we hear about it all the time about how certain coaches go about their interpersonal ethics and stuff of the like, and sometimes it's just borderline, not even borderline. It is appalling, right? And I think the I mean, for me, my biggest thing has always been talk to my athletes, right? How am I as a because I can sit here and tell you I'm obviously going to be my biggest advocate because I'm very confident in my services and how I am as a person. I can tell you that you can feel safe with me. You can, understand that I'm a professional. Talk to the people that have been working with me for a year,
Yeah.
2 years, 3 years, 4 years, longer than that. How am I on a day-to-day basis? Has there ever been any issues with unprofessionalism? The answer is going to be no, right? And I think that matters more than anything else.
Hmm.
In the same vein, we just kind of talked about with empathy and stuff of the like. You have to understand that like if an athlete had a former coach who was in a position of power who abused that power, there's regardless of any other metrics, they're probably going to be a little bit more guarded, right? With you at least for the first, I don't know, it's going to be different for everyone, but probably the first couple of blocks, it's going to be different, right? So I suppose that would be my system, and then also just checking in as a person, and I will do
Yeah.
that. Like, and I've said this, and a couple, if my athletes end up, other athletes besides yourself end up listening to this, every once in a while, I don't do it all the time because I just don't think that that's that's not necessarily my job, but again, this is kind of like we talk about going above and beyond. I will say, all right, so thank you for the update. We'll take you for example. For Jonas the athlete, just out of curiosity, how is Jonas the person, right?
Mm,
And then just let someone talk about that, because sometimes someone will be like, Jonas the person is maybe not doing so well right now, and just allowing the safe space to kind of keep it in the WhatsApp bubble, right?
yeah,
I think kind of maybe not necessarily creates buy-in. I don't think you need to sell someone, that you can trust me
yeah,
with tactics or anything like that. But at least from a standpoint of, hey, this person actually cares about me as a person.
yeah,
So that's what I would say to that.
for
Yeah.
sure. And I think what you just mentioned about like that goes such a long way sometimes to just how are you? Like what's going on? Like especially when you notice like from the way they text something might be off, just shooting a message like,
Yeah.
hey, is everything all right? Like is everything okay? And that can like I said, that can go such a long way because it actually makes you feel like someone cares about you besides the training itself, and that's such a big thing. And
Yeah, it is.
what you mentioned too about just if there's no issues with your professionalism, like all your athletes are gonna say the same thing, like when you say like you can speak to all my athletes, like nothing is gonna come up,
Hmm.
and I think that those are all very good points, and I just want to add to that. I think for me, I think it's important to like when it comes from just a respect perspective, it's kind of important to like speaking in a manner that reflects upon like your professionalism, like, and the most basic
Yeah.
thing is just making sure every athlete is treated the same, gets the same service and the same attention regardless of performance, strength levels, experience whatsoever. I think that, I mean, that should be an obvious thing, but we know it's not for every coach. But
Hmm.
that's kind of the baseline that should be there, and kind of going back to the like what you mentioned earlier too, like being understanding of like different life circumstances, like different struggles, remaining respectful of that, everyone's got different stuff going on, and it's sometimes it's a good idea to check in on them, so
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
And, I'm sure we can keep talking about this, but what you just talked about, like making sure everyone gets the same service, is something I'm super, super passionate about,
yeah,
right? I've had so many scenarios where I have someone who is I guess what we call a quote unquote higher level athlete, I guess in terms of their strength, right?
yeah,
And they sent a late training update, or maybe they just didn't at all, or maybe it was just kind of like a half-ass thing. And I'm like, hey, man, I'm going to treat you exactly the same way I would if you were not at the strength level you were. I'm going to, you didn't uphold your end of the bargain. I'm going to do what's most efficient for me to stay on my workflow. And just because you are a 485, 500 dots lifter doesn't mean I'm going to treat you and give you more leeway than someone who's sub 300. You know what I mean? And if anything, I'm trying my best to make sure that the people who are at that level understand that I still care, maybe even sometimes more about their progress than someone who's at that top level, because the person at that top level has probably got a lot of things going for them that just makes that a little bit easier. It's really difficult to take someone who's been training for 4 years and is still, like kind of hovering around like that 300 dots mark to get
yeah,
stronger and stronger, because that's probably just
yeah,
not in their genetic code.
yeah,
So, making sure that people understand that, like, and especially with guys like yourself and I, we work with different demographics. We don't only work with, IPF high level people.
sure, sure,
Um, Being able to kind of scale. And I love it when I get the feedback that, like, hey, you make me feel as if I'm the only lifter on your roster in terms of like
yeah,
the intent and
yeah,
detail. You know what I mean? Like that's why I do what I do. You know what I mean? And that makes me feel validated for my efforts for sure.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, that was a good one. So let's get into the next one. I
Mm.
think that one is like, okay, maybe it's a bit more like practical programming heavy, but I was like lately I've been thinking about we all want to like I think we should like in some way control our rate of progression when it comes to like our lifts, like not every block needs to end at like an RP10, and not every block needs to be 10 kilos stronger than the preceding block, and so on. But
Yeah.
I'm thinking like and I'm gonna throw a question your way, like is it only about controlling rate of progression when it comes to like actual true long-term progression in powerlifting? Like, because I was thinking if that were it, like if controlling the rate of progression was everything to it, like no one would ever plateau. Who does that, and obviously that like we still plateau and that still happens, like, and I think controlling that rate of progression, it is a big part, and I think it is in some way or another it is essential. but like what other factors do you think like are important to like truly make long-term progress? Because plateaus are like they're unavoidable no matter what you do, you know?
Yeah, when we proposed this question, this is the one that probably stumped me the most and made me kind of like think the most. Um, and there's a lot that goes into long-term, LTAD, long-term athletic development,
Yeah.
and rate of progression. So I've kind of changed my mind on controlling rate of progression, not in the sense of I want to go away from it. Like, if anything, I'm leaning harder into it. But I'm looking at controlling rate of progression from a sense of I'm not trying to keep progression going longer. It is just
Hmm.
creating a predictable system that I can call upon every fourth week, every primary day. It's not for the sake of I'm trying to draw this out longer and longer and longer and prevent plateau. Because, like you said, if that was the case, if we got someone on a good system, they would never plateau. You can do
Yeah.
the best pacing scheme in the world. Eventually, that's going to stop working. Where do you go from there? And what I was thinking about when it comes to longer term development, I think honestly, lifestyle. Lifestyle and where your life is really, really matters. And I was thinking about this with my own training, and I think this is probably the best parallel, right? So I'm an infinitely better lifter now at 28 than I ever was when I was 21, right? Now, you might say that out loud, and it's like, yeah, I guess males, when they get to be like the 28 to 32-ish range, I guess from like a standpoint of like, all of like the hormonal levels, maybe you're at your most mature, whatever. But generally speaking, that's when, life starts to look a little bit different. When I was like in, I think what you guys would call university, and, maybe not having the best diet, and I was working a summer job where I was, on my feet for 8 hours a day, and then, parlayed that into, jobs with lots of commutes and stuff like that. My progress, although I was putting the exact same effort into training as to what I'm probably doing now, maybe even more, my return on investment was way less, right? Because my lifestyle didn't really support what my goals were.
Mhm.
Now, I'm not going to say I'm lucky because I worked extremely hard to get to the point where I'm at right now and have the flexibility in the schedule that I am, or that I kind of have now. But my lifestyle definitely supports, my athletic goals a little bit more. So I think from an athletic development standpoint, how your life kind of looks and how it sways really seems to matter.
Yeah.
The other thing that comes to mind is what did you do before you started controlling rate of progression, right? Um, I my history as an athlete was in quote unquote traditional sports, basketball, football, or American football, and track and field. And, for, I don't know, first of all, can we curse on here?
Sure. Go ahead, man.
Okay. I didn't want to like say that before, or whatever, make you have to edit or whatnot. I would say like the first 3 years, right, of my weight training was just fucking around and finding out, right?
Yeah.
I went down to the local gym and I would do, 3 sets or up to 5 sets of 12 to 15 on every machine in the gym and get myself sore. Like
Mhm.
that was what I would do. Um, People miss out on that phase. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that I'm like the most genetically gifted because I really don't. I don't think I am. But I think in terms of like all of the things beforehand, right, developing muscle mass and stuff of the like I had a decent amount. I'm a smaller guy for sure, but I had a decent amount of muscle mass in my frame as early as like 16. People are missing out on that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You can't long term athletic development something that never had a base to begin with, right? And I think a lot of times people want to just jump straight into powerlifting specificity. And we can say, you and I can say we're blue in the face, like, no, you probably should prioritize X, Y, and Z. But that takes a lot of time. People didn't realize that
Yeah.
that's 3 years, right? And not many people want to develop or devote 3 years of non-specific training before they get under a heavy barbell and start doing singles and stuff like that. They want to do it immediately. So
Yeah.
that's probably my take on that.
Yeah. And I think that that's just a big reason why when like bodybuilders switch to powerlifting, like why they get so strong so quickly because their baseline is there. Like they were jacked before they actually started powerlifting, you know? Like there's a lot of muscle mass they're bringing to the sport.
Yeah.
Um and I mean, luckily we can still do both at the same time. Like we can do like hypertrophy stuff and we can like build strength and we shift our priorities, of course. But and that's I think that's what you alluded to. It kind of comes down to like the lifestyle factors, like how how do they allow? that to happen or not.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, just like I say this all the time, but if you dial in on everything, the only limiting factor is still time, because you
Yeah.
can't get around that. Like it's still gonna take time, even if you control all your variables, you have the perfect programming, the perfect coach, whatever. It's still time that's gonna limit you. And
Yeah.
I was at, like I told you, I was 2 or 3 weeks ago. I was at Sheffield, and out of fun, like I looked up the open powerlifting of most competitors, and there was, I think, not a single one who's been competing for less than like 7 or 8 years, and that's just competing itself. That doesn't mean weight training. And there were a
Yeah.
lot of athletes who've been competing for 10 years or more. And again, that doesn't like that's just competing. Maybe they've already trained for like 5 years before they actually started doing a meet. And by
Hmm.
then maybe they've accumulated like a sizable amount of muscle. And I think that's going to help a lot. And I think one thing I wanted to mention here too, like uh, true long-term progression, I think it requires you to be like healthy most of the time. Like an injured athlete can't perform if you're not healthy. If you're injured all the time, you won't be able to progress. Like, but I think that just speaks for the fact that you should make, like, obviously, like staying healthy a priority of like your programming and whatever you're doing. Because if you don't take care of that, like controlling the rate of progression doesn't matter. Like your lifestyle factors also don't matter because you're hurt. And I think, like, okay, injuries and then like small aches and pains, they happen. Sometimes you couldn't even predict it. Sometimes it just happens.
Yeah.
um, but I think there's a lot of merit to like making sure that it doesn't happen regularly, and it doesn't happen often, because that is just gonna take away time you could spend actually training and making progress. And
You can't get stronger not training.
yeah, exactly. And if you dial order, then it's still just time. And I think um, what comes with that is also just patience. And I think a lot of people underestimate the time it actually takes to make progress. And I was thinking about that because we were talking about. I shot you the message lately, like when I did the 150 on bench a week ago.
Hmm.
I referenced the message back when you specifically said, like, very soon you will load the yellow in addition to two reds. And that was in May of last year. And I specifically remembered that you used the word soon. And
Hmm.
soon, for me, that is still soon. Like soon in
Yeah.
powerlifting terms can still be a year. It doesn't mean four
Hmm.
weeks. When you say I'm going to hit X number soon, I'm not expecting to hit that within the next 3 months. Like maybe not even
Right.
six. Maybe it's still a year, and that's perfectly fine. And I think once you like adapt to that mindset a bit, that these like time kind of flows a bit differently when it comes to the
Yeah.
sport. Um, once you're okay with just being more patient and like trusting your coach, trusting the plan, whatever, it you shift your perspective on how, like, the actual time frame it takes to develop as an athlete in the sport. I think.
I would firmly agree, man, and I think that that's a great way to kind of think about it. And what you just talked about with like the Sheffield athletes, and kind of looking at their open powerlifting and stuff of the way. Sometimes what I like to do with athletes too is I will pull up, someone who maybe I notice that they follow or something like that. And it's like, hey, let's look at their open powerlifting.
Yeah.
What do you see here, right? And I'll have someone just kind of analyze that. And sometimes people just don't know what to look for, and I'm like, okay, I'll kind of point it out. Did you notice that the total, or their coefficient, maybe let's say they've done 22 meets, that go up every single time? No, right? Was there periods where it looks like they had a big gap between meets, and even though it was a year, they only put 5 kilos on their total? Yes. Did they PR every single lift, every single meet? No.
Yeah.
Why would you have the expectations that you're going to
Exactly.
do that, right? If
Exactly.
the people at the absolute highest level of the sport, haven't done that. And I'm thinking about my own journey, right? So I just competed. My first meet total in 2018 was 482 and a half, right? So 482 and a half kilos on the total. And then I believe I just totaled 637 and a half. So it took me about, what, 7 years, 8 years to put 155 kilos on my total. And this is the other thing we didn't talk about. I stayed at the same body weight the entire time.
Yeah.
If you're going to make that effort, and this is the other thing too, I'm almost at the point where I'm ready to kind of leave, that behind because I think the next wave of progress for me is going to be at a heavier body weight. Not quite there yet because I'm willing to do all of the other things, right? In terms of like weight manipulation and, proper eating and stuff of the like. But it took 8 years to do that, right? It took, we'll talk American units. It took me 8 years to add 100 pounds to my bench press. People want to do that within 3 months. And
Yeah.
if you're not willing to go up a weight class, if you're not willing to, dedicate yourself to like hypertrophy and stuff like that, that's how long some of this stuff can really take. So if you want to, I don't know, let's say you're 18 years old right now and you're ready to say, okay, by 26, I'm going to do this. I can get you to where you want to go almost 100% of the time, as long as it's realistic. Not many people
Yeah.
want to do that though. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. And I think just a closing thought to this one. I don't know if you saw it, but like Sean Noriega, he recently posted like something on Instagram about it doesn't really matter like how strong you actually are, because if you're not like if you don't have the genetic code for it, just like let's say squat, I don't know, 300 kilos or whatever, and your genetic code says you're only gonna squat 230 and that's it, you're still gonna have to put in just as much work as the guy who actually would be able to squat 300 in, let's say, 5 years. And just because
Yeah.
your like absolute ceiling isn't as high, it doesn't mean we won't struggle for it, and you won't have to struggle for it. And I think
Hmm.
that's also the separation between maybe you're not genetically gifted, and maybe there's a specific ceiling to your strength. And I think the closer you get to it, the more like the slower your rate of progress gets, independent of like the absolute numbers, and the more you're gonna have to tinker too. Like with programming and this and that. And I think in that vein, there's almost not much difference between coaching and like actual elite level lifter who progresses slowly versus someone who just
Yeah.
progresses slowly because they've almost reached their max, like in terms of like their genetic ceiling. You're just
Hmm.
gonna have like you're still gonna it's still the same situation basically. Just the numbers are different. That's the only thing that's like separated between that.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah, I would firmly agree. And that's sometimes a tough conversation to have with people, but you just got to be secure. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
not, I mean, it's like kind of the same deal with any other sport. Just because you start playing basketball does not mean you're entitled to playing in the NBA or
yeah,
EuroLeague or Eurobasket. You know what I mean? So it's like, um, there has to be sliding scale goals. You know what I mean? And I just wish, I don't know how it is, overseas, but in the States, there's starting to be more goals other than win nationals. You know what I mean? We have the
mhm,
regional level meets, we have state level meets and stuff like that. Like, I think that there's more. And then, of course, at the end of the day, I think most of us get into this just to kind of like, beat our prior self and be better than what we were last time. And I still think that's a great goal. But I think that that's sometimes a fleeting goal for some people who have certain type of personalities that dictate them being a little bit more competitive, but maybe they don't have the makeup to actually be top line competitive. So just having little goals like that, or maybe having like a friendly rivalry with a friend in the gym or something like that. I actually think all that's good. That's good stuff. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Because I think this sport is very, very unrewarding if your only sole goal is to be IPF world champion. There's so many things have to go right in order for you to do that. And even if you have like a theoretical opportunity to do that, you could show up on the day. You can't play defense in powerlifting, so you can't control what
yeah,
anyone else does. Only thing you can ever can control: how strong are you getting? What are you doing? To kind of like facilitate getting stronger. And then when you get to the day, are you making the right calls? There's
yeah,
a lot of like sliding. You can't prevent what someone else does. So, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I think that sums it up quite nicely. So yeah, let's get into the next one. That's another one I've been thinking about for like I think ever since like we started working together, because you kind of like yeah, I think it's safe like safe to say that you kind of like taught me how to do this, and that is just like management of like emotions, focus and hype in training or on competition day, and specifically
Yeah.
to enhance your performance or to use that to your advantage. I think this is probably important for any sport, but I think it's like maybe especially important for powerlifting because it's powerlifting, but in its nature it's difficult. Like you're putting yourself in a situation where you're moving the heaviest amount of weight possible, and that is difficult. um, so how do you approach that, like specifically from a I'm not like even thinking about you as an athlete, but you as a coach, like is there any way you can like kind of help your athletes or teach them to kind of use that to their advantage? How do you approach that?
Yeah, and I can think of a couple of different scenarios when we were talking about this. And understanding how an athlete ticks interpersonally, I would say there's at least a somewhat positive correlation to how they will tick on meet day and in competition day. Some people have to do like a almost like a polar opposite, right? Where they have to create an alter ego in order to perform,
Hmm.
and you don't know until you know kind of get to a meet and you handle someone, and you understand how they operate. But kind of meeting them with their personality and not over emphasizing being serious or anything like that. I have an athlete that comes to mind, a women's lifter, who the first meet that we did together, of course, you know, we'd been working together for quite some time. You know, I kind of approached it how I would with, I guess, just like as a blanket template. You know, third attempt, I'm gonna get you fired up. I'm gonna, you know, kind of, you know, get in your ear and tell you, you know, all these like motivational things. Um, and what I kind of recognized post meet, she doesn't operate that way. She that made her more nervous than anything. And I'm like, okay, of course I felt bad for that, but in the same vein, you don't know until you know. So I was like, hey, you know, based upon, and we had a conversation after the fact. I was like, the next time we circle back to, you know, doing a meet together, I'm gonna approach it very differently, right? And the most recent meet we did together, it was the opposite, right? I was very free flowing. You know, still wanted to make sure that she understood, you know, what was kind of going on, from a standpoint of like, do you want to know what's on the bar? I'll let you know. If you don't want to know, I feel very confident making the right call. And she had her best meet ever, right? And it was a very free flowing day. She felt very comfortable, and that's basically what it comes down to, right? Is comfortability. And you know, for some people too, I actually think there's unique situations where they try to like emotionally regulate too much, and I'm like,
Hmm.
no, like allow yourself to feel. You know what I mean? Don't try
Yeah.
to put a suppressor on what you're doing, because that's your body trying to put you in a position, maybe instinctually, subconsciously, whatever word we want to use, to unlock your best performance. You don't want to suppress it. I've had people who are like, I try to approach my first attempt with no hype, my second attempt with no hype, and then I turn it all for the third. Well, okay, maybe you want to do that. Now your second moved awful, right? Because you basically approached it like a, you know, you're on the verge of death, and now I don't know what to choose for your third. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
you just almost failed it or something like that. But yeah, I mean, I think from an emotional regulation standpoint, I don't necessarily do like a hard teaching thing for that, right?
Mhm.
I kind of like to analyze the athlete as they're warming up, and we'll kind of go based upon that. And you know, again, you don't know until you actually get there, because I have athletes who present as like a goofball in their feedback and their training, and then they get to me and it's just like laser focused and like, oh, okay, this is not what I thought you would be. But that's how they operate best. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's really like a case by case basis.
Yeah. But I think that that kind of goes back nicely to our first topic, you know, um, like if you know the athlete, you're gonna have an easier time figuring out like what how they deal with that, like what do they actually need, and especially on meet day. Like you're not there in training, but you're gonna be there in meet day in best case. And like letting this be a topic like for athletes to talk about, you know, like talking about like like what do you feel like approaching the bar, you know, like what does that situation feel like for you? Does it how does it change depending on the weight or whatever, you know, like
Yeah.
just having this as a topic to talk about. And like on meet day, if it's your athlete and you've been coaching them for a while, it's probably gonna be a lot easier than someone you're just handling. Because I remember specifically one an instance. I was at in December of last year. I was in November, I think December. Like I was at Croatian Nationals and I was handling a friend of mine, like who's not my athlete, and he's an extremely intense and emotional lifter, you know. And I haven't handled him before at a meet. Like I've seen him compete, or I've seen him compete before, but I haven't handled him before. And obviously, we talked about it before, like what's it gonna be like, and it's obviously a bit more challenging to like adapt to a situation where you don't exactly know how the athlete is gonna behave, what they're gonna be like, you know. And but I think that that's it. It's kind of it's 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 a challenge you can use to grow as a coach, because it's gonna make it even easier to handle like even your I think your own athletes, if you've handled a lot of
Yeah.
different personality types at different meets or whatever, because you just like you said, if you manage to get into the flow with the athlete and it just clicks, you know, that's I think that's a beautiful thing. um and yeah, getting more into like specific stuff. Maybe I'm gonna start with that. Like, I think what helped me a lot, when it comes to like management of hype, emotions, and whatever. And I think a big thing for me was like just self-talk, actually, like talking to myself before the set, during my setup, or like even
Yeah.
imagining I'm going to do exactly this and that. Or even another thing that comes to mind is just imagining what it's going to feel like after a successful lift, like the positives
Hmm.
that come with it. I think that's especially helpful for like athletes who get very nervous and very anxious approaching their set and their lift. But you can just kind of like gaslight yourself the thing, hey, this is going to be over in 10 seconds, and in 10 seconds I'm going to feel great, because I'm going to have
Yeah.
a successful lift under my belt. And of course, like, that's not going to work always, but I think those are some useful tools. um, yeah, how do you approach that? Like, do you use that for yourself, or how do you do it?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that come to mind. I'm a big fan of speaking things into existence, right? I
Yeah.
think that, a lot of the times, and again, we always keep referring back to this, as long as the goal is somewhat realistic, right? Even if it's not intangible right in front of you, but if it's somewhat realistic, if you say that you are going to do this, the way that I kind of see it, and this is the dilemma that I think is always created, and it's a good one, you either you back yourself into a corner, and when you back yourself into a corner, you either fight back or you just let yourself stay in that corner. There's
Hmm.
really no in between, right? And I think for most individuals, who care about this stuff, they're going to go full force, right? They're not just going to back away from it, right?
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of that, and I think from more of like a training perspective, yeah, I mean I'm the same deal in the sense of just talking out loud, you know what I mean, and
Yeah.
thinking about, and I will do this even when I'm on the platform. I'm just thinking, what do I need to do to succeed? So like I'm thinking about the bench press, right? I'm thinking about, all right, stay on my legs, make sure that I am getting my neck flat or something like that. I will say that out loud. When I'm deadlifting or stuff like that, sometimes I love positive self talk, and I'm a big fan of positive self
Yeah.
talk. You can do this, stuff like along
Yeah.
those lines. But in the same vein, I'm still sometimes a fan of negative self talk, right? Like I will
Hmm.
look at the bar loaded with the amount of reds and a blue or whatever the hell, and I'll point to the bar and I'll say, "Not today, motherfucker. Like today
Hmm.
is not the day that I'm gonna
That's
fail." You know what I
awesome.
mean? If it's
Yeah.
some other time, it's not today, and stuff like that helps me. You know what I mean? That's what I was talking about with like that alter ego type deal.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
and then, what you just talked about when thinking about post lift and, what it's going to feel like. I heard it a long time ago when I was still in Olympic weightlifting. Someone was like kind of talking about the dilemma that they had with an athlete where they were thinking about, I need to set, because in weightlifting you have to pull with the hook grip for everything and stuff of the like, I need to do this, but what if my hook grip slips, or what if I'm not at the right position in my hips? And they're only thinking about the possible negatives about taking like a heavy weight. And the coach was like, have you ever thought about succeeding? Right? What would it look like thinking about, what if I nailed everything and it felt incredible? And that, although that sounds kind of rudimentary, that resonates with me and it resonates with athletes. It's like, okay, yes, maybe this seems daunting. Maybe it seems like, it's a little bit outside of reach. What if it's not, though? What if it's actually something that is, like you were prepared to do the entire time, right? And I think having a mindset of, and this is the other thing too, I'm a big fan of this, creating situations where athletes think mentally that they can't fail. And it's not necessarily that they can't fail like outright. It's okay, hey, if you're not, and I like to break it down this way. If you don't hit it, it's because you're not strong enough today. Does that mean that you're not going to be strong enough the next time we circle back to it, or the next time we circle back to it? No, you have infinite opportunities, right? Or if an athlete's in a meet and hey, it's their second deadlift and they already PR'd their total, and we maybe want to push it a little bit in that third attempt deadlift. Hey, we got the goal that we want. You PR'd your total. You PR'd all your metrics. You can make this. This is just icing on the cake. You know what I mean? You might as well give it everything, because if you miss this, you still had a great meet. You know what I mean? And for some athletes, that really, really resonates. So creating what I like to call safety nets. So if you do fall, instead of falling down here, you're falling here, right? And it's much easier to get back up to the top, instead of, kind of crashing and burning and having to climb all the way back up there. So,
Yeah. I think that's a good one, because at least for me personally, and I think most people would agree, I would much rather be in a situation where there is no doubt in my mind that I'm gonna fail the lift and then still fail it, than being in the mindset of, okay, I don't know if I can do this. This is gonna feel bad, and then actually confirming that and failing it. Like, it,
yeah, right.
it still feels way better. Even if it's the
Yeah.
same weight and you still fail it in both situations, in both scenarios, it's gonna feel much better if you failed it when you believed you could do it, you know, like obviously it's not gonna feel as great
Yeah.
as hitting it, but you're not confirming your own biases, and I think that's actually like that's not a very healthy thing to do, like especially like permanently and for a long time, always going into it with the mindset of I don't know if I can do this, I don't know if my grip is gonna hold or my bar position is gonna be stable or whatever. And I think I don't know if that's I don't know if I've thought this through enough to make sense of it, but I think that's a big separator too between like very good elite level athletes and just not elite level athletes. There's a certain I don't know if I can say like absolute, but like absolute confidence and belief in their abilities. Like, of course, there's limits
Yeah.
to it, but I think I've talked with you about this. I met Joe Bornstein at Sheffield, and he's one of those athletes, where I'm like that guy is absolutely confident in that he can hit this weight and that, and he can do that, you know. And I admire that.
Yep.
That's a really cool thing, and I think that's something that's a common thing among like elite level athletes. There has to be at least some of that confidence aspect and some of that belief thing, you know, like who, like, I mean, even like 2 years ago, who would have believed that this guy can hit like 900 kilos at 83, you know, but this guy believed it and he did it, you know, that's a really powerful thing, you know, and I like that.
Yeah, I mean, and beyond it being a powerful thing, like he just obviously didn't have the meet that he anticipated at Sheffield. But guys like that, their bounce back ability is what makes them great. If they can take a meet
Yeah.
like that, and everyone, maybe not everyone, because I think most people, like Joe Borenstein. I think he's a pretty likable guy. Could say, hey, he's washed, he's cooked, or stuff like that. They take that on
Right.
the chin, and then they're going to be right back to work. Like, okay,
Exactly.
yeah, I just totaled 855. No, I still think next meet I'm going to total 915 or 920. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Regardless of how that meet went. And I think that that's like a very admirable quality. Maybe it sometimes rubs people the wrong way. Again, we just talked about it. I'd much rather someone be confident in their abilities, have to rein them in a little bit, than have someone not be confident in their abilities because
Yeah.
it's so difficult to get someone to try to go outside their realms of comfort if they don't even believe it to
Hmm.
begin with. You have to have the belief and you can't have it's got to at least be 50-50. If I think you can do something but you don't think you can do something, okay, you're probably never going to get there. I'd much rather it be, hey, I think I can squat 200 kilos and I think that you can, but maybe it's going to be, a little bit, you know it'll be difficult, but I think you can do it. Then I
Yeah.
think you can squat 200 kilos and you're like, no, I'm currently at 160, I don't think I can. It's never going to work
Exactly.
out. In terms, you probably will never
Yeah.
get there if that's the case.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I think it's possible that you can reach that point as an athlete. Like it's gonna require work too, but I think once you go there, it unlocks like the next level, so to speak, of your performance like abilities. You know, like once you actually start believing in it. You know, like and
Hmm.
independent of like we talked about this before. Like your genetic code is set. You know, but if you're not confident enough that you can actually keep progressing and keep hitting that doesn't matter. You know, like you're only gonna find out
Yeah.
if you dare to push. You know, if you dare to do it. Um, so yeah, just I wanted to mention one little thing before we go into the last topic because I think that might be like just helpful for like athletes listening to this one. When it comes to like anxiety and nerves on the platform, I think a big thing is just finding some like finding finding some routine and comfort even on meet day and stressful situations. What I mean by that is just I think what it comes down to for me is just like setup of your lifts, like squat bench deadlift, because setup dictates like execution afterwards. You know, like focusing on making sure your setup and therefore your execution is the same in those stressful situations on meet day, on your third attempts, on your RP9 signal at the end of the block, or whatever, compared to like your lighter sets. You know, and I think that's where the like finding routine and comfort comes from because usually you feel pretty comfortable and then in routine when you're taking your I don't know your 3x5 back offs or whatever and or your light top set and it feels good, you know. Um, and I think a big mistake people often make is just it's just that thing like changes in technique or setup due to anxiety or nerves, you know. Like in my opinion it's like imperative to do the setup the exact same like every single time, especially when it gets like stressful, and especially if you're already prone to like making small adjustments in technique or setup when you get nervous. or when you
Yeah.
feel like you feel nerves, because like your execution is so dependent on setup anyways, you know. Um, so yeah, that's kind of the. Do you want to add anything to that, or want to hop to the next one?
No, I firmly agree. Like, keep everything the same. Every time I'm in the gym, every time I touch a barbell, a squat, bench, or deadlift, exact same routine every single time. So by the time I get to the platform, it's the exact same routine every single time. That takes so much stress out of everything. So, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, good one. Yeah, let's get into the last one. I think that one is like equally applicable to, I think, both like self-coached athletes and athletes who have a coach. But um, speaking from like an athlete perspective, like how do you make sure you're not like obsessing over your own training too much? Like I know I've been guilty of this in the past. What I found for me personally is just like the biggest thing for me is just don't think about it outside of training. Like when I'm not training, I'm not really thinking about it. I'm not looking up my Google Sheets. I'm not looking up what I'm gonna do next Tuesday or next whatever. I'm gonna look it
Yeah.
up maybe 15 minutes before my session, see what's going on, and then look at it during training, obviously. And once that's over, like I'm sending feedback, I'm getting feedback back, and that's kind of it. You know, like how do you approach it when you to like combat this like neuroticism, and how do you like even teach your athletes to be a bit more relaxed when it comes to that? You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, you have to have a personality and you have to have other things than powerlifting, right? What else do you enjoy, right? Um, you know, at the end of the day, like we kind of talk about, the sport is very fleeting. It's not early on, it'll be instant gratification. Very quickly does it start to be instant gratification. It's more delayed gratification, right? Um, so if you're relying that solely on your dopamine and stuff of the like, you're going to be really, really in for a rude awakening when you have your first injury or you have your first off session and stuff of the like. So, I don't know if I have like a go to, like, hey, this is how I would like you to approach it. But anytime I see someone kind of obsessing over their um, training to the extent of it's consuming their life, I'm like, hey, don't you have other things that you need to either A, be present for, or that you enjoy, right? So I have people who are parents, right? At the end of the day, you could have the best squat session of your life or the worst squat session of your life. Your son or daughter who's an infant is going to look at you the exact same. You know what I mean? Relying upon the fact that you are a great father or a great mother or something like that, or you have a passion for what's like a really good example of like a other hobby or something like that. Maybe I won't go that direction, but like I don't know. People have other interests, right? People like watching other sports and stuff of the like. Powerlifting should be one part of your life. It shouldn't be your life, right? And I think a lot of the times people make it their entire life, make it their entire personality because it seems very appealing, right? To say that like I'm a healthy person who goes to the gym and X, Y, and Z. It could also just very be an unhealthy thing where this is like all you obsess about. You know what I mean? So little things. Once you send your feedback or look at your videos, one of the things I'm really passionate about, after the day ends, I'll delete those videos and I'm moved on
Mm-hmm.
to the next day,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
next session or stuff like. Another thing that's kind of maybe controversial that I don't do and I think has made me a better lifter, but I don't know will resonate with everyone. I don't, although I'm aware of what I did last block and stuff of the like, I really don't compare, right? Because I think a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
times we compare circumstances that are not one to one. So my week 5 one block might be marred with circumstances of external, variables compared to the next one, compared to the next one, compared to the next one. It's a good metric. It's a good say like, okay, I did this last block. I should probably pace out for this block. But I'm not like, okay, this moved poorly compared to the last one. Something's gone wrong. I don't really think of things
Yeah.
that way. I take of things in the moment. So I think you let your coach kind of interpret it, and I let my coach interpret the training data that's in front of him. I only do what's in front of me. And I think,
Yeah.
if you asked me this question 3 years ago, I did a very, very bad job of that, right? I was thinking
Yeah.
about, I did this last week, so I got to be doing this week, and I got to do this. No. Like, all right, what did I hit last week? Okay, this is probably where I need to be. If I'm within plus or minus 10 pounds of that, I'm probably going to be fine for the next week based upon the circumstances. So that's probably my recommendation based upon that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good to it's a good idea to let go, you know, like you hired the coach
Yeah.
for a specific job, you know, like let them do their job. Focus, like you're the one who has to execute the plan, you know, but Like that's the only thing you should worry about. I'm trying to focus in training. I'm focused 100% on training, and outside of training, I'm okay. Maybe I'm thinking about it sometimes, but it's not like, I think that's a good part you mentioned about like deleting the videos. I'm not gonna watch my squat top set from 3 days ago like 5 times today. I'm not gonna do that. And even on the
Even if
day,
it was
like
the
okay, maybe I
best,
watch it 3 times.
yeah.
Sorry, what? What were
Even
you
if it
saying?
was like the best output of your life. Yeah,
For
I was
sure.
saying
Yeah.
like even if it was the best output of your life, like you are not going to like I, what happens the next session? You know what I mean? When it feels bad, like you're just creating a
Yeah.
situation where like the only situation it can go is down. You know what I mean? So it's like
For sure. Yeah.
get over with. Like just you got to move on.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like obviously I'm gonna celebrate it, I'm gonna put it on Instagram, whatever. It's nice. But then it's over, like, and the next session is gonna
Yeah.
come around. And I'm still gonna have to lock in and do my job there, and like letting go of that when you're outside of training. I think if you only have powerlifting, there's no other options, because you can't let go, because what else are you gonna hold on to, like, if you let go of the powerlifting part, like, give it your all when
Yeah.
you're in training, and let it go when you're not training. And I think
Yep.
there, I think that, I don't know how much that ties into it, but obviously I'm very much biased here, and so are you. But I think there's a reason why the best athletes are like, and I can't think of a single one currently, like of the top level guys and girls, who is not coached. And I think there's a big reason for that. I
Yep.
think that's one of them. Because you can just, like, you don't have to worry about that. Or, I mean, I think most of these people don't do that, but you don't have to worry about that part anymore. You can focus on execution. Like, you don't have to obsess over training outside of training, because you're not programming for yourself. And if you are programming for yourself, you're more likely to fall into that trap, so to speak, than when you can actually um, let your coach do their job.
Mm-hmm. I also think from a perspective too, if you are a coach, and not to say that everyone needs a powerlifting coach and stuff of the like, I know for me, it's a really good tool to say that like, hey, all the things I'm asking you to do as an athlete, I'm currently doing myself. And I live a very
Yeah.
busy lifestyle in terms of like how many people, need to get a hold of me throughout the course of a 24-hour day. And if I can justify the time to send my coach a training update in the manner of which he asks, if I can do it, I know for a fact you can do it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
just kind of like talking the talk and walking the walk, I think is super important, because if you are saying, listen to me, and I know for me when I was self coached and I was like nitpicking my training interblock and kind of changing things, willy nilly, and, just kind of doing what I wanted to do, maybe not necessarily what I needed to do, that's being hypocritical. You know what I mean? So I think some people can do it. I think it worked well for what I was trying to do for the first 5 years of my career. I know for a fact I would not be where I'm at currently athletically. And then also, I wouldn't be as good of a coach as what I think I currently am at the moment if I didn't hire a coach and really try to like separate, okay, this is Eric the athlete, Jonas the athlete, Jonas the coach, you know what I mean? The
Yeah.
the meet director. Anytime all of those are kind of blended into one, none of them really get better, right? Maybe it's like marginal, but you can make exponential progress as an athlete, exponential progress as a coach, and have a hard separator of, those individual personalities.
Yeah. Yeah. And one more thing I wanted to mention about that one is, I think I saw this on an Instagram post later. I don't know who posted it, but it was a coach from the States. Especially when it comes to, when we're talking about like not obsessing over training too much, especially when it comes to like bad sessions. Um,
Yeah.
I think the person called it like compartmentalizing, like putting um, parts of yourself into like different drawers or different boxes when it comes to training, like making sure not to
Yeah.
obsess over the aspects of training that are off or feel weird, while still being able to focus on like more of the positive stuff. And that can also just be like, maybe something outside of training is off, but you still gotta hit that session. So you compartmentalize. You put that part that is feeling off away for those 2 hours, lock in on training, get back to it afterwards. And in training itself as well, like, we are gonna have like, very rarely like all three lifts are on, like exactly perfectly on and feel good at the same time. But that doesn't mean you can't focus on the rest of training. Like, I think that's if you obsess over the negative parts only, you're still gonna have a very hard time enjoying the positive stuff when it comes to your training.
Yeah.
Like, if you
Right.
neglect that
I
part.
I firmly agree.
Yeah. So we got to the end actually. We got all our four topics done. That was a really good one, Eric. Thank you for coming in. I enjoyed that, and yeah, to like kind of end our little episode here. If people want to find you on social media or anywhere else, like where can they find you? What's your like contact information and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I would say if you wanted to, I don't know, just see more of my stuff, it would be at Agent21EMH on Instagram. Any other social media, please don't follow me. Not because I post controversial stuff, because I don't use it. I think I have a Twitter. I have not used that in years. Please don't add me on Facebook. I hate Facebook. Um, and I think that's everything. That's probably where to find me. But yeah, that's where I post most of my stuff and my athletes. I do have some coaching pages as well. I would love if you guys would follow the Team Hogan coaches. So I want to give all of them a shout out if that's actually
Sure.
possible. So the
Please
Team Hogan
go ahead.
coaches Instagram page. So Michael Beaupre, Gavin Akeley, Logan Allaire, Ben Rivers, Henry Sandelin, and Evan Larson are the coaches underneath me, and they all do a very, very good job. So if anyone listening, wants to either work with, wants to work with me, but maybe doesn't have the means to afford it, or maybe just wants to kind of dip their feet in the waters of powerlifting, those guys would be a really good option, and they have a really good rapport with testimonials and stuff of the like. So yeah, come join the team. We got a really good thing going.
I can confirm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So yeah, that was episode 3 with Mr. Erik Hogan. Thank you for everyone who listened, whether you're from the United States or my own country, Austria, and I will see you next time.